Welcome learners. In the last session, we got you introduced to the Flutter framework, and here we are understanding all the things that goes into Dart programming. Well, I'm not going to dive into the code. On the other hand, over here, I want to have a clear difference to get established between the framework, that is Flutter, and what is the framework is going to use as a programming language, that is Dart. You'll understand why Dart is so popular when it comes to Flutter programming, and in fact why it is so easy to learn. Stay tuned into the session. Let's dive into the session wherein I'm going to get you introduced to Dart. Well, let's imagine that you have a very simple Google Map project in which you want to categorically define restaurants, gas stations, and all the other components into Google Map. Well, this is your application that you imagine to build. So what you're trying to do is putting this rectangular box in which Google Map should get displayed. Now below this, there are numerous buttons like restaurants, gas stations, and whatnot that could filter the data on your Google Map. Well, this entire thing you will be creating into Dart. However, the framework, that is the tools like buttons, components, and in fact list, they are all part of Flutter. Well, what's exactly Dart then? Dart is a communication medium to Flutter which says you have to put the component here. For example, let's say Dart will say to Flutter that you have to put the component at the topmost part of the screen, followed by there will be a restaurant button, a gas station button that is going to be adjacent to the restaurant button. All of these instructions we're going to write in Dart. So going through similar examples, I'm going to get you introduced to Flutter as well as Dart, and I'm going to primarily focus on these 4 questions. Probably these are few questions you will even stumble upon when you're trying to learn about Dart. Well, exactly like Java, you can even use Dart for your small projects. Let's say you want to create a very simple calculator. I'm talking about a calculator like Java on which you can try inputting something from the console window. Well, if you're trying to imagine of creating a calculator like in mobile app, you need 2 things. You need Flutter, where you can create the buttons and the UI, and then the programming, or you can say the coding knowledge, which gives intelligence to those buttons. Well, that's exactly where these 2 come into picture and have an amalgamation between them. Talking about the first question, is Dart better than Flutter? No. That's because they both go hand in hand. Are Dart and Flutter the same thing? Again, no. That's because Dart is a programming language and Flutter is a framework which helps Dart to work into and create the mobile app. Is Dart language enough for Flutter? Yes. It's the language on which you can create your entire mobile app. Perhaps let me give an example on this. Imagine that you have an Android app. So when it comes to Android, you will create a UI into XML, and then you'll create your code, or you'll write your code into Kotlin, or you can even do it in Java. Talking about iOS, that is Apple's iPhones, your UI gets created into storyboards. And on the other hand, you'll be having your code that either uses Swift as a language, or it uses something called as Objective-C as a programming language. Well, what do you notice is it's always a combination of 2 different frameworks. For example, UI using XML and the code using Kotlin. On iOS, the UI using storyboards. Then, in case of Flutter, well, that hassle is removed because we have just our Dart that does both the things for us. Talking about the last question, should you learn Flutter first or Dart? Well, in that case, I'm going to show to you both of them hand in hand. Now when it comes to identifying the difference between framework and a programming language, well, you have to have a clear difference that your programming language is still going to be Dart. It's just that the framework will become Flutter. Let's say you'll have an example from web wherein your Java is a framework. You must have seen that Java has got something called as Java Swings, which can be helping you to create UI. On the other hand, there is a Java framework called as Spring Boot, and this is used on the web, or let's say on the back end. So what do you notice? Usability of Java into two things. Near in future, you're going to see this Dart programming language to get adapted to multiple web and mobile frameworks. In fact, there are certain creations wherein they have helped Dart programming to run on a server. Now, what we're going to try and understand is how your programming language will be used for software developers to give instructions. So let's say if you want to have a button which says hello to you. So your button is basically your development, and then when you tap on it, you specifically say the mobile app to say to you hello. That's kind of writing instructions. So the instructions will happen with Dart programming. When it comes to Dart, it has all the features that a modern day programming framework would be having. It supports object-oriented programming, it supports encapsulation, inheritance, abstraction and null safety. Well, if you're coming from Java background, you should be having an idea about A, B and C. What is null safety? Well, null safety is a feature wherein if you're having null variable values, you can try and understand with the help of certain examples that your null value will be immediately catched upon by your compiler, and before you run your code, you'll be getting a warning about the compilation. Let me deep down drill into this part wherein we have, let's say, a name variable, and I'll put this as null. Now, the moment I do this, over here, you'll notice that it says the value of type null cannot be assigned to the variable type string. Well, if I just put a question mark over here, you will notice that the error is gone. What does it see? It sees that basically if I want to have any variable to be null, I have to specially mention with the help of a question mark. This basically simplifies when you're trying to do a code. That's because when it has a question mark, you can understand this variable can be null. This is a bit contradictory in terms of Java. That's because over there you can get null pointer exceptions. Dart is kind of smart to tell you that there won't be any null pointers exceptions that are going to arise. That's because the compiler takes care of every null safety. Hopefully the Dart now has got into your nerves, as you will be able to understand that framework from the very basics. Well, in the next session, I intend to cover the entire projects that we're going to develop. In fact, it will be a well-versed scenario wherein you have the outcome from the entire course to be ready here onwards. That's because I'm going to talk about all the projects that we're going to develop throughout the course. In fact, what I have done is broken down the course into multiple modules so that if you are willing to skip even one, you're not going to have an issue with dealing with the other module. But it's highly recommended that you go by the sequence, as in that case you'll have 100% of the knowledge that goes into the entire course. Stay tuned and keep learning with Hoping Minds.